Hi, good afternoon. We're going to start very soon. Just would like to know whether Ms. Bouasavath Viphasouk is in the room already. Okay. Thank you for being here. Saved my life.
So welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch, especially those watching online. I don't see any blue jackets here, so we haven't recruited anyone from next door, from the Lao Women's Union, maybe tomorrow. So this second dialogue, we're going to be focusing on customs procedures and trade facilitation, which is Chapter 4 of the RCEP Agreement. So without further ado, I'm going to make way for the experts, and I will invite Sven to be the moderator. Sven, over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy, for calling me an expert. Just the moderator here. Yes, so we've heard this morning many things. And one of the things that Deborah mentioned is that looking at the tariff schedule, the rule of origin is one thing. But this is just to prepare yourself to export or to import, right? You also need to look at all these different standards, different rules that would apply to your goods or your services, and most importantly, what happens at the border, because we know that cross-border trade is quite complex, import and export. We've heard this morning that Laos has negotiated or is a party to a lot of different agreements already. So why do we have another agreement with other rules, another set of rules under RCEP? So what we'd like to do in this afternoon, we are going to use a similar approach to what we did in the morning. First session on explaining what the chapter on custom procedures and trade facilitation is, what does it say, what it means for Lao PDR, and we also this would be provided by Deborah, and we'll also have the opportunity to listen from an official from the Customs Department. We're very grateful for the Ministry of Finance to join our workshop, a very important player in the trade arena. And she will explain how the Customs Department has prepared for this agreement, what is being done to get businesses to avail of the opportunities and to get ready. In the second part, session 2, we'll also have, again, a number of experts from the private sector, and will explain to us what it means for them to export with this new rule or import through these new rules. We have a similar dialogue with them, and you will get a chance to ask questions to the speakers. So I promise that we will not fall behind time and behind the schedule for this second dialogue. So I'd like to invite Dr. Deborah Elms to join us, and we now have chairs. So you may be able to sit on the chairs later on. And after Deborah, so that you'll be ready, I will invite Ms. Bouasavath Viphasouk, I hope I pronounce it correctly, who is the Deputy Director of the Legislation Division from the Customs Department, Ministry of Finance. Yes, this is it. So can you go back to the previous one, showing the nice smile of Deborah? Yeah, Deborah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, clearly that was pre-COVID, right? We all look a little more ragged since then. So thank you all very much for coming back from lunch. I am going to go through some of the issues around trade facilitation and customs now. There will be a little bit of overlap with this morning, but I have prepared the slides in case you only listen to part of the sessions. So let me talk about the trade facilitation and customs part of this agreement, because as we mentioned this morning, if you want to move goods around the region, there are lots of chapters that matter to you. trade in goods chapter itself, plus the tariff schedules attached to that. The rules of origin, super important, but also procedures at the border matter. So this is actually not going. Maybe it goes this way. No. Look, I was this close to success. I'll just tell you and you move the slide. Next slide. So this one we already said this morning, but I'll just repeat again. Remember, there are 12 active members, 7 of us in ASEAN, China, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. You can only use RCEP between active members. So right now you can't use it to trade with Indonesia, Philippines, and Myanmar. Fingers crossed, end of this year, they will get their act together and we will all 15 be in RCEP. Next slide, please. Again, it's based especially on the ASEAN +1 agreements, especially ASEAN-China, which you may be most familiar with. But the crucial part here is that there are elements that are different. And in particular, the customs rules in RCEP are different from the ASEAN +1 agreement rules. So you need to make sure that you're looking at the right agreement and that you're aware of sometimes the exceptions that exist. And in particular, as a least developed country, Lao has received or has asked for all kinds of different exceptions, Lao plus Cambodia plus Myanmar, got some extension and exceptions. So you're going to have to read the rules fairly carefully, very closely, just to make sure that it does in fact apply to you. And all of those texts and schedules are available on this website. They're also available on the Ministry of Customs website from here. Commerce, sorry, MOIC. Next slide. So we mentioned earlier this morning about trade in goods. It's not just the trade in goods that matters. There are other elements. We'll talk tomorrow on services and investment. We will not actually talk about intellectual property rights, but those of you who are brand owners worried about the ideas embedded in your products will be happy to know that there is a comprehensive IP chapter which will apply with consistent rules across all of the markets in RCEP. That can be extremely important, especially for businesses that, again, you're spending a lot of time developing products and you want to make sure that they remain protected. So there is an IP chapter that's quite ambitious that we will not talk about, but you may want to look at. What it will do, I think, is change trade in the region. So you will be trading in Asia for Asia. That is something we have not had before. And again, the benefits that we've talked about already is the tariff reductions, the identical rules. So you now have that one set of rules, in particular, one set of rules for the origin, what constitutes an RCEP or originating good. One document, which I'll talk about in just a second, and consistent rules at the border. So what is supposed to happen, and I know some of you will be rolling your eyes, but we are supposed to have the same customs rules at every port of entry across RCEP. So fingers crossed that will actually take place. Next slide, please. Crucially, again, not every product qualifies. The fact that it comes from Lao to another RCEP country does not mean that you are going to automatically be granted RCEP benefits. You only get RCEP benefits if you ask for RCEP benefits. In particular, for trade in goods, you have to say, this is an RCEP qualifying good, here's the documentation to prove it, and then they will deliver for you those tariff reductions that you are entitled to. So it's very important that you make sure that you are following the rules, because only originating products get the benefits of RCEP. The rules of origin, which we are going to talk about again, are different sometimes from the ASEAN rules. So if you're used to using ASEAN Form D, you will have to look carefully at RCEP to make sure that you are using the right rules. And in particular, while RCEP sometimes does allow a 40% value addition, the value, remember, in RCEP comes from all 12 members. So you can add up or accumulate the value then from your ASEAN neighbors, participating neighbors, plus China, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. So 12 different countries can contribute to the content in your product if you are using RVC rules. So that's especially important for many of you who make products that contain a lot of, for example, Chinese parts, components, raw materials, or products that are coming in, let's say from Korea. You can add that to the RVC calculation. So for many of you, it is easier to meet the RCEP RVC level because you can now count the value of the content that comes from 12 markets instead of, say, 10 members of Asean. And many times for you, the content that you care about actually comes from China or fabric out of Korea. Okay, so it's very important to think about a bigger group where you can pull from for calculating RVC. And I will talk about the textiles in just a second here. So often we have an RVC rule. That RVC rule is not just ASEAN content, it's RCEP content, but it's not always RVC. So you have to, again, look at these rules very carefully. The next slide goes through this in a little more detail, I think. So this shows you the textile rules. So here you can see on the left is the chapter heading. I said every product in RCEP has a specific ROO attached to it, but often the officials do whole chapters at once. So you can see most of the textile chapters are the entire chapter. So not just chapter 57 on carpets and textile floor coverings, but every kind of carpet. Wall-to-wall carpets, area rugs, round carpets, whatever the carpet rules are, as long as they're in chapter 57, the rule, as you can see across the other side, is CC. So CC in this case is change in chapter. If it was wool and it is now a carpet, it has changed chapters. Wool is a different category, or woven wool threads, or I have no idea how one makes a carpet, but whatever is in a carpet, the rubber, the plastic, whatever is in your carpet, becomes a carpet, it changes at the 2-digit chapter level, CC, change in chapter. So if you look at most of these textile rules, they are all CC. For Lao, that is actually extremely good news, because you don't make a lot of fabrics outside of silk yourself. Most of your fabrics, embellishments, buttons, whatever, are from someplace else. And so it can be challenging sometimes to hit either RVC, because the value added by Lao sewing is not always 40% of the value of the product, but also because if the fabric has to be Lao fabric, you're in trouble. You don't have enough Lao fabric. So CC rules for textiles can be very helpful for companies. Fabric comes from anywhere, elastic comes from anywhere, whatever, as long as it was that, and inside of Lao, an RCEP economy, you have transformed it to chapter 60 knitted or crocheted products, then you qualify. And now it's an RCEP originating good. You fill out the preferential certificate of origin, and you can export it at often 0 tariffs for all of the RCEP markets. Okay, so again, this all adds together here. The whole thing needs to be seen in one piece. So textile rules, I think, are especially good for a developing economy like Lao, because you can import the fabrics and all of the components without a problem now. And it doesn't even have to come from RCEP. So you could import, if you wanted to, high performance fabrics out of Taiwan, which is not a member, use that, transform it into a final swimsuit or athletic gear, and qualify under RCEP. As long as it was transformed here, it qualifies. So that is extremely helpful, I think, for countries like Lao. Next one. Again, we looked at this one earlier this morning, but I'll just repeat it very quickly. Not every rule of origin is change of chapter. This happens to be coffee here. You can see we switch from CC, change in chapter, to RVC 40, which is, again, 40% of the value needs to come from RCEP, not just from Lao, but from RCEP. Or in the case of green tea, which happens to be on the here, needs to be wholly obtained. You have to pick the tea from an RCEP economy. So we have variations in these rules. And the point is that you should look at your Annex 3A for what are the specific rules that apply to your product, and then figure out how to make your product match, assuming that the tariff benefits are worthwhile. Next one. This is what the RCEP preferential certificate of origin looks like. So having decided that you're going to make a product, you're going to sell it in an RCEP market, you now need to fill out an RCEP certificate. This is the equivalent of an Asean Form D. Okay, that's a different agreement. This is the version of it you use for RCEP. But what you should note for most of you is that it actually looks fairly familiar. We're not asking you for a ton of information. They're not asking you for things you probably don't already have. That's the certificate of origin. Fill that out, attach it to your shipment, and you're ready to go and take advantage of the RCEP benefits. If you don't have this piece of paper, the customs officials will not look at your box and say, here is a box coming from Lao, it qualifies for RCEP, and here's 0 tariffs. So you have to have the right certificate of origin filled out to accompany your goods in order to get 0 tariffs or lower tariffs under RCEP. So that's the form, and hopefully it will be online and digital and not just hard copy. Next slide. Once you fill it out again, it goes into all of the markets. So it goes into all of the markets using RCEP rules. Again, let me just make this point because sometimes people get confused. What I can't do though is take an RCEP form and say, I want the Asean benefits, because they may not be the same. So you have to use Asean forms for Asean and RCEP forms for RCEP, even if you want to trade between Asean members. So you can't be mixing up your forms and your agreements. Okay, just keep that in your mind. It's all the same. And I mentioned the swimsuit thing this morning. So once you make a swimsuit, you qualify into all of the 12 markets, and that can be very lucrative for you. Sometimes, again, because RCEP is brand new, the tariffs under RCEP will be higher than alternatives that have been phased in over time. So you will have to look and make sure that you are actually getting the best tariff rates for your products. Eventually, that will hopefully, fingers crossed, we will end up with RCEP benefits that are definitely the best and consistently the best. And the faster that that gets implemented, the happier all of your businesses will be. So as soon as we can implement these things, that would be fantastic. And there is no reason actually why governments have to wait until whenever it is that they agree. They can always pull forward benefits. So a government might have put in a 25-year phase out on tariffs, but a government can decide to accelerate that and get it done in 10 years or 15 years. So when you look at the schedules, many of you will get a bit depressed, especially in business, because you will say, oh, it's 25 years before I get the benefits. Remember that that's the baseline, and it probably, given how ASEAN has worked in the past, will go faster. So it should be accelerated, and we should get those benefits even sooner. So think of it as the baseline, and you get at least that kind of benefit and maybe better, which would be good. And then the last thing I just want to mention is this project called self-certification. Self-certification says, I don't need that piece of paper, and I don't need to go to the Chamber of Commerce to get the piece of paper. And crucially for business, I don't have to pay the Chamber of Commerce to do this. I can do it. I just write a note that says, I declare that I have met the rules. That's self-certification. It requires, of course, that you meet the rules and you keep the paperwork to show that you met the rules. It's not like I get to make it up, but self-certification, good idea, not yet in RCEP. Will be coming, but it hasn't yet started. So for now, you need that certificate of origin, that piece of paper. Next slide. I just want to mention a couple more things in this chapter before I wrap up this section and turn it over to my colleagues. There are some specific parts of the chapter that may apply to you. And in particular, there are some new rules that apply to how customs works with you, Lao Customs works with your business. One thing that can be very useful is advance rulings. So an advance ruling is you go in and you have this product and you say, what is it? how do we classify this product? Because there's often a bunch of different things it could be. And so customs will tell you, what is the thing? What is this? What is the HS code for this thing? And then it's stable for 3 years. That matters a lot for some of your businesses, because what happens in ASEAN especially, customs likes to stick everything in other. So there's a whole bunch of categories of stuff with 0 tariffs, and then there's a category called other, 10%, 20%. And what often happens is customs says to you, oh, you know what, it's an other, 20%. What? So what advanced ruling does is it says from the customs, it's a this, it's not an other, and you can't rename it, and I don't have to prove it every time I ship to you. So given how difficult, again, customs can be in some of our markets, having a stable 3-year ruling is actually very helpful, because some of our colleagues open up every container and make you re-justify every container. So this is much better. So once it's made, 3 years. Same thing is true on rules of origin. So if you think you meet the rules of origin, customs can certify that you've met the rules of origin, and then they don't ask you every time that you ship something. There are some release guidelines, because customs can be very slow in some of our markets. So they are supposed to release express shipments within 6 hours. And they are supposed to release perishable items as much as possible within 6 hours as well, so that your fresh food doesn't rot while they wait for clearance. And all goods are supposed to be released within 48 hours. So this could be very helpful for many markets, but do note that Lao asked for an extension on these provisions. So inbound into Lao, don't expect right now that you will have things cleared in 6 hours or 48 hours, because Lao said, we're not ready to do that yet, but we will be ready to do so within 3 to 5 years, depending on the rule. So there is some flexibility, especially Lao, Cambodia, and Myanmar, on some of these time guidelines and some of these rulings. But for everyone else, they said that's the rule, we're going to have to follow it. Next one, I think is the last one. One last thing that I wanted to mention, and I always try to mention it for business communities, is there is an authorized operator scheme in RCEP. Some of you may use the ASEAN AEO, the Authorized Economic Operators, AEOs from ASEAN. There is a new one coming for RCEP. We don't yet have the system in place because it's relatively new, but it is to your advantage to either be an authorized operator yourself or to have your freight forwarder or customs broker be involved in the authorized operator scheme. Because what it will do is it will facilitate movement across borders into RCEP markets. So again, we're not quite sure yet on all the rules because it's early days of implementation, but we are meant to have fewer requests for, they decide that you are a legit company, that your processes are reasonable, that we haven't caught you shipping counterfeit and illegal, illicit goods, that you pay the duties that you're supposed to, basically that you are a fine, upstanding firm. Once we've done that, then we put you into this category of an authorized operator, and we spend less time looking at your stuff. And that allows, as a government, us to search for the riskier firms who are more likely to be shipping illegal, illicit goods, who are more likely to be circumventing the rules. So if you're in this category of a good company, that's better for you. You get faster clearance, you get fewer shipment inspections, you get payments that can be made after, not on the spot. You will have potentially, you could just submit the declaration once and it could apply to all shipments across a month. So in general, if you are shipping a lot of things, if you can get yourself involved in these AO schemes for RCEP, you should be much better off. So you or your broker or your freight forwarder. I think that's very important because the benefits for a company could be quite significant of doing so. But again, like always, I can't stress this enough, keep careful records, because they can, even if you're an authorized operator, you still have to be able to show records after the fact So you don't throw them out, don't write them on a napkin, don't keep them with somebody who quits the job and takes the records. So you need to make sure that you have those documents, because critically, many of our dialogue partners are extremely fussy about customs, and they will come after you and they will ask for your forms and your documents and the background details. So make sure that you have all that in place, and you will avoid some very steep fines and penalties. So get yourself in the system if you can, in this authorized operator scheme as it develops, but do make sure that you take responsibility for your company and your record keeping so that you then keep getting the benefits of this scheme. I think that's the last one of this slide, yeah? Fantastic. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say on customs and trade facilitation. So again, there are some real benefits coming for RCEP, I think, for companies who are trying to move goods around the region. And I highly encourage you, again, to be part of that process. If you find, my last point before I sit down, if you find problems, either here with customs, which I'm guessing you won't say anything about, but in other markets with customs, please make sure that you tell government officials, either yourself or crucially through a trade association, they can complain on your behalf, because otherwise we can't get this fixed. So if something is supposed to happen, if your advance ruling is not being accepted, then government needs to know that, because they won't ask about it if they don't know. So it's really incumbent upon companies to feed back information directly or through their trade associations to make sure that we sort out these early problems around RCEP customs. Otherwise, we can't ever fix them. Because again, government doesn't go looking for problems, so that if they don't get told about them, they're not going to fix them. So I strongly encourage all of you, please reach out to government to make sure that they are aware of any issues that you have along the way. Okay, let me stop there and turn it over to my colleagues. Thanks.
Thank you, Deborah. And as I mentioned, Deborah is providing the contents of the chapter, in that case, of the custom procedures and trade facilitation. But we feel that it's also important for you to understand practically what it means in Laos to use this, what is advanced ruling, authorized operator schemes, risk management, national single window, how this works in practice, or how this will work in practice in Lao PDR. So for that reason, we are very happy that the Ministry of Finance accepted our invitation, especially the Customs Department. So I'd like to invite Ms. Bouasavath Viphasouk, the Deputy Director of Legislation Division from the Customs Department of the Lao PDR, to take us through what it means for Lao PDR for customs to apply what we've just heard from Deborah. Please, can you join us?
Good morning, distinguished participants, respected participant at this meeting. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to have been given an opportunity to provide feedbacks and comments on the custom procedures and trade facilitation. My name is Bouasavath Viphasouk, now Deputy Chief of Legislation Division, Department of Customs, Ministry of Finance. So I apologize that today I have not prepared the PowerPoint presentation for the comments, for the feedback. I would just provide overall comments as follows. The situations of implementing RCEP Agreement of Lao, RCEP have endorsed in November 2020 and taken to force the 1st January 2022. 15 member states together and 10 from ASEAN member states, and negotiating parties include Australia, China, Japan, New Zealand, and Republic of Korea. Now, 12 countries has already ratified RCEP agreement. Only 3 countries that have not yet ratified, as mentioned by Deborah. For Latvia has ratified RCEP agreement, but cannot implement yet due to the fact of the transfer of the tariff reduction scheme under RCEP from AHTN 2022 to AHTN 2017. That had not yet endorsed by Japan, Australia, and the Philippines. That's why the Department of Customs, Ministry of Finance cannot issue declaration for implementations of tariff reduction schedule yet. And then it affects the imports under the framework of RCEP agreement. That means we cannot implement yet. But the export, but it doesn't affect the export, only the import side. RCEP agreement framework, if the general rule of RCEP agreement could be implemented, the rule is ready, everything is ready. Customs Office is ready to apply it and would happy to provide facilitation for custom procedure, in particular the export. If it's not forbidden commodities, it is not control commodities, we will facilitate for the export according to the rule and law. For example, the export of agricultural products, product is already established in Article 101 on the Custom Law version number 81, dating Lao National Assembly, March 2020, exception for agricultural products. I think the most important thing, the key things on the importing country, especially Lao agricultural products. The key thing is that we look at importing countries of our products. What are the conditions? What are the measures? What is the regulation? What rules they apply? This is Lao entrepreneur would have to learn from. We need to know that. In order to know the tariff scheme under RCEP agreement, in order to know how much tariff rates, how much reduction, from RCEP agreement compared to other agreements. In fact, the benefits of using another trade agreements, including RCEP agreement, is to promote exporter. Government will benefit, if we export more, and it's also bringing foreign currency into the country. So that's overall, short comments. If you have any question or any further areas to ask me more, you can ask me. The point on advanced ruling, I have not prepared for AO advanced ruling. We do have some regulation you can access for further detail. So you can ask our custom department. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentations, for the speech. And there is actually an opening for you to ask questions either to our representative from the Customs Department or to Deborah. So same rule as this morning, though you won't have a voucher for the lunch because lunch is past. But please raise your hand if you have a question. Tell us who you are, who the question is addressed to, and try to be specific to the chapter that we are focusing on this afternoon, meaning the custom procedures and trade facilitation. Okay, you can fire. Gentlemen.
Thank you very much. I think the question will be to Ms. Deborah. Who decide on a product category if we jump to the category other and we need to specify which category?
Answer yes. This is a great question. It is a real challenge for a lot of businesses in and around Asia because particularly in ASEAN, it is a common practice for officials to throw everything into other. One of the benefits of RCEP is that we are supposed to have consistent rules around this, and the advanced ruling discussion in particular could solve this. In other words, if we have an approved procedure among the RCEP economies about who classifies HS codes, rules of origin, in particular, those are the two big problems for firms, then that is accepted, has to be accepted by the other party's customs officials and has to remain stable for 3 calendar years. One of the challenges, of course, is implementation of this rule. It's unclear still, as you just heard, how long it will actually take to implement some of these provisions. Unfortunately, we are already 8 months into RCEP, and we are still not implementing key parts of this agreement. So I would suggest that companies in particular start complaining loudly to this government and others about their non-compliance with the RCEP rules, or we can't sort this problem out. But that's what RCEP is meant to do. Then my last point on this question, because I do think it's very important and relevant, there is meant to be a series of committees around RCEP headed by a secretariat. We will have a separate RCEP secretariat coming. That secretariat will have divisions or departments, one of which will be or will have to be customs and trade facilitation, which will allow RCEP customs officials to meet regularly to discuss any implementation challenges. So that is actually a very good piece of news, I think, for businesses, because it means if we see an obstacle or we have unclear understanding among officials about what the rules mean or how to effectively and consistently implement them, we have a place where you have those discussions. And then my last point, which is also relevant, we have this at the ASEAN level, but within ASEAN, it can be difficult to get ASEAN customs officials to have alignment around consistent rules. When you make this bigger and you add in China, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, I think you will find more enthusiasm for consistent application of the rules and government officials who are more willing and eager to engage on problems than you see at the ASEAN level. So for me, again, one of the benefits of RCEP compared to ASEAN is the involvement of these dialogue partners means that there are some easier ways to tackle hard questions than we have at the ASEAN level. So I think this is a real problem, this classification question. And I'm hoping that consistent rules and implementation procedures at RCEP will help solve some of these issues, even within ASEAN. But it will also require businesses, again, to communicate where the problems actually are. Otherwise, this committee will meet and they'll have a lovely lunch and that'll be the end of it. So you have to say what the problems actually are, or they won't get solved.
Thank you, Deborah. Gentleman over there, please.
ฮัลโหลเจ้าสบายดีตอนสวยเนาะข้าพเจ้าก็ต่างหน้าจากสมาคมนักธุรกิจหนุ่มซึ่งก็ได้เป็นบริษัทข้าพเจ้าก็ได้นำเข้าสินค้าจากต่างประเทศเนาะขอมีคำถามหรือว่าประกอบคำเห็นน้อยหนึ่งเกี่ยวกับมาถามทางทางต่างหน้าของกลุ่มภาษีเนาะ ก็คือว่าบริษัทข้าพเจ้าก็ยังบ่ทันได้ใช้ฟอร์มRCEPนี้เนาะเพราะว่าเพิ่นก็ยังบ่ทันได้ จะตั้งปฏิบัตินะแต่ว่าบริษัทข้าพเจ้าก็เคยใช้ฟอร์มE Asean China เดี๋ยวฟอร์ม D Asean นี้เดี๋ยวฟอร์ม S ลาวเวียดนามเนาะแต่ว่าขอจัดตั้งปฏิบัติอำนวยความสะดวกทางด้านการค้าของภาษีนี่คิดว่ายังมีตัวหนึ่งที่ว่ามันยังสร้างกำแพงหรือว่าสร้างความยุ่งยากกันให้แก่ผู้นำเข้าคือตัวอย่างว่าข้าพเจ้านำสินค้าเข้ามาเนาะมีเอกสารมีสัญญามี invoice packing list มี CO คือว่าเรียบร้อยหมดละแต่มาฮอดด่านแล้วก็ยังมาได้กลับมาขอใบยั่งยืนสิทธิพิเศษทางด้านการค้าทางด้านอัตราภาษีนำกรมภาษีพี่ซึ่งขออยู่แม่นข้าเจ้าเอิ้นแผนกนิติกรรมไว้โดยซึ่งว่าเฮ็ดให้คอร์ดตัวนี้นี่มันยังตัวอย่างว่าสินค้าข้าพเจ้าเอาสินค้า A เข้ามานะเอาเข้ามา10เทื่อก็ได้ขอ10เทื่อ100เทื่อก็ได้ขอ100เทื่อนะทั้งที่ว่าแม่นนั่นสินค้าตัวเก่ารหัสHH code ตัวเก่าก็เลยว่ามีความเป็นไปได้บ่ที่ว่าจะขอครั้งทำอิฐแล้วก็แล้วเทื่อที่2ที่3เทื่อต่อๆไปนะถ้านำเข้าสินค้าจากสนิทเก่าด้านเก่าแม่นให้ใส่ตัวเก่าได้เลยแต่ว่าเพราะว่าข้าพเจ้าอยู่เวียงจันทน์นี่สิง่ายน้อยนึงเนาะมาขอไปยังยืนอยู่กรมภาษีนะตัวอย่างว่าอยู่ต่างแขวงคือผงสาลีอัตตปือหรือว่าแขวงอื่นที่ว่าไกลจากเวียงจันทน์นะสิมาขออยู่กรมภาษีที่คือว่าเป็นการยุ่งยากอันที่1อันที่2เกิดค่าใช้จ่ายให้แก่บริษัทตัวนี้ก็เรียกว่าอันที่1นี่พอเป็นไปได้บ่ว่าให้ด้านวินิจฉัยเลยหมายความว่าเจ้าหน้าที่ภาษีอยู่ด้านต้องมีความรู้ทางด้านสิทธิพิเศษตัวนี้วินิจฉัยเลยว่าตัวนี้นี่ถ้าว่ามีฟอร์มมาแล้วสามารถยกเว้นภาษีได้จักเปอร์เซ็นต์ตัวนี้ก็ต้องได้ให้ด้านวินิจฉัยเลยตัวนี้และอีกอันนึงเนาะก็คือว่ามาขอใบยั่งยืนสิทธิพิเศษทางด้านภาษีอยู่แผนกนิติกรรมนี่ใช้เวลาถึง 4-5 วันถ้าว่าเขาเอาเครื่องที่ว่าบูดเนามาเนาะแต่ว่ามันมีอายุกำหนดนะตัวอย่างว่าเป็นอาหารทะเลบ่อันนี้นี่ก็ถือว่าเครื่องมาฮอดด่านแล้วก็ถือว่าบ่สามารถเอาเข้ามาได้เฮ็ดให้สินค้านั้นได้รับความเสียหายตัวนี้ข้าพเจ้าก็เคยเอาหมักไหม้มาเนาะหมักลิ้นจี่จากเวียดนามก็ขอ CO นี่เสียเวลาไปหลายวันเติบก็มาฮอดเวียงจันทน์ก็ถือว่าได้รับความเสียหายก็ได้ขายราคาครึ่งค่าตัวนะก็เฮ็ดให้เสียหายตัวนี้ก็เลยว่าอยากขอทางแผนกนิติกรรมนี่พิจารณาช่วยหรือว่าประกอบคำเห็นเนาะว่าสิมีวิธีช่วยผู้ประกอบการแนวใดเพื่ออำนวยความสะดวกทางด้านการค้าอันนี้แม่นการสัมผัสตัวจริงเนาะการเฮ็ดตัวจริงมาก็เลยว่าประกอบมาแชร์นำในกล่องประชุมนี้ขอบใจหลาย
Thank you for the questions. And I think part of the question, if I may paraphrase, is also whether RCEP preferential CEO would solve some of the issues that you have highlighted. So maybe I'll give the floor to customs departments. There's only one representative in the room, sorry, to give a few responses to the gentleman.
Once again, thank you very much for the question. I think that's a good question. Nowadays, the different form is to have to be processed and approved at the Department of Customs. But you don't have to bring original form. The entrepreneur can send scan file to us. It doesn't mean that your product arrive at the checkpoint the entrepreneur, the importer would have to get the information to us for verification before the items arrive. But why we need to check? Because the capacity of customs officer in every checkpoint are not ready. They're not in full capacity. We have the plan to organize a training for customs officer to have capacity to be able to approve the form on the site. It takes time, but we have a plan to release Form D, because Form D is already in electronic form under Asean system. Electronic forms already. We have a plan to release. The checkpoint will receive it and check at the checkpoint at the border. Other form like Form B or something, it has to be approved by our department. But we have a plans, to release to the border checkpoint at this time in order to avoid the damage to your commodity. I'd like to ask you that please get your original copy from the exporting country. Send document to us first, so that we can certify to the border officials, to verify it. It will help shorten the process. Thank you.
Thank you for the response. I hope it was satisfying to you to hear that it's part of a long-term process, but efforts are being made to also train officials and to give clear instruction on how and when to submit documents. So thank you for the response. Lady in the back has a question. If you can give a microphone. Thank you.
จะ สบายดีตอนบ่ายเนาะข้าพเจ้า
Good
นาง
afternoon. My name is Bang Samuti, Chairman, President of Lao Businesses Association, and also I'm President of Sarawan Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'm owner of Import and Export on agricultural product. I'd like to ask the project. So far, I have exported coffee, as Deborah mentioned, as a green bean to Thailand. If it is a Form D under ASEAN agreement, I paid about 90% of tariff to import to Thailand. If there's no form, it could be just normal import. You pay 120%. Under RCEP agreement, how much we can get tariff reduction? So because it will make our coffee product be compatible, but under the current scheme, the price of Lao coffee would probably be high. If we could get tariff reduction, it's okay. But for other countries, we have to be under the framework of agreement with other countries. Thank you.
So Deborah, as the only person in the room who have read the 14,000 pages of the RCEP agreement, please go back to page 3,647 and tell us.
I hope that your government did a good job of asking for coffee reductions in particular, because that's a terrible tariff. There's no way to be competitive at that level of customs tariffs. But I will also say, having looked briefly at some of the coffee tariffs, coffee and tea, which are classified together, Chapter 9, very sensitive for some governments, and strong concerns about the export potential for some governments like Vietnam on coffee in particular. Remember that for the first 7 years of negotiations, India was in the room as well, and there was deep resistance on tea, to opening up tea. So the net result is we have less tariff reductions in coffee, tea, Chapter 9, than we probably would have had otherwise. So I can't promise you duty-free treatment on coffee. But what I would say is that you should keep pushing, because as some of these governments change their schedule over time, they could adjust Chapter 9 tariffs. So that's the first part. The second part is that again, being able to be part of this consistent grouping should make some of your challenges easier. In particular, again, paperwork, this consistent use eventually of the RCEP certificate of origin would be much much easier for you. And there is a requirement in RCEP that they all be online as much as possible. So we are moving towards, but we could not require all online submission of documentation for RCEP. But I assume that that will start to come over time as we get governments more comfortable with online submission of documents. One thing we all learned in COVID especially was that the requirement to appear in person and have a physical chop on every form was impossible in COVID. So that has pushed forward many governments to accelerate electronic transmission of documentation in ways that I think will be very helpful. And I can tell you in particular, some of these dialogue partners in RCEP are very insistent that we have electronic documentation, particularly for perishable goods and agricultural products. So it should be getting better. But anytime there's a challenge, please do flag it for government.
Yes, and I think we're going to talk more about online submissions in the next session, which will be on private sector perspective, on the custom procedures, but also on the national single windows for Lao PDR. So we will have a chance to elaborate on some of the points you've mentioned. Thank you, Deborah, for the answer. The two gentlemen were raising their hand at the same time, so whoever want to go first.
ขอบใจท่านเซเว่น
Thank you, Zubin.
ข้าพเจ้าชื่ออิทธิฤทธิ์ยังนุวงศ์
My name is Intilit Yang Nuwong,
ของหัวหน้ากรมนโยบายการค้าต่างประเทศ
Deputy Director General of the Foreign Trade Policy Department. As a person in charge of RCEP, I'd like to have comments,
เพิ่มเติม
additional comments on
สภาพการจัดตั้งปฏิบัติ
the status of implementation
ฟอร์ม
of
ออกไปประเทศ
the form used to export to RCEP member states.
ก็คือที่บอกฮู้
And as you may be aware,
สัตยาบันของ
um,
บรรดา
the ratification by RCEP member states,
13ประเทศทั้ง
including 13 countries,
ติดพันกับการให้
and along with ratification,
ดำเนินการขั้นตอนภายใน
there's also a procedures of arrangement, national arrangement
สารบัญอัตรา
in terms of transform custom tariff, from 2012, 2017 or something. So once we have completed the transformation of custom tariff, the process that we have to open it to member states to have comments. Every country is doing the same thing in terms of transformation, and open up forum for member states to have comments on whether is it correct, is it aligned with the regulations of transform under the WTO regulation. Every country will comment on that and ask questions. I think in many countries, many countries may ask, and the response would have to be responded by the country that raised a question. So again, if the response are clear, so we have Australia, China, Japan, Korea, and New Zealand. So these countries have been asked, and they already respond. They responded to the question, and they have issued legal preference for implementation, especially for the import of commodities through the custom checkpoints. In conclusion, I would say that we do have form. We have RCEP form to export Lao products to these 5 countries. I mean, it can be implemented right away. On the opposite, like I said, any country that have not issued legal enactment, for example, Laos, have been asked by one country. We have response to that country already. We need to get confirmation saying that our transformation is done. We can issue illegal enactment. We can accept, the product from that country. In terms of import, nowadays for the export, under RCEP agreements, we can export to the 5 countries I mentioned above, and the rest we need to wait the remaining country to issue legal enactment. So back to the issues of internal arrangement, you know. I understand that even the agreements taken to force the January 2022, but it has to be according to the subject domestic issue. There's just time, you know, to enforce it. And that's something I like to add in terms of use of the form. Thank you. Let me continue on what have been asked about the use of Form D to export to Thailand, like coffee, the green coffee beans and roasted coffee. The tariff mentioned in Form D, I understand that coffee is one of the 17 items of Thailand products that the sensitive product of Thailand. The many item, one of the 7 item is coffee, the sensitive product for Thailand. That's why Thailand, they charge, you know, tariff quite high. I'm not sure whether it is 90% or not. I'm not sure. Maybe 40% or something, 45% or 20%. I heard that Thai developed tariff barrier. Many things if we send Form D, they said, I'm not accepting Form D. I used MFN preference tariff of WTO. I think it's not relating to rule of origins. It's about internal regulation. They pose technical barriers to Lao products. So we're now negotiating with Thailand. You know, this is not about rule of origins. This is a technical barriers. What really mentioned, as already mentioned by the DDG, if you use an RCEP form, if you want to use the RCEP form, we need to have legal enactment from Thailand. But if we use Form D, they raise the tariff. They instead use MFN tariff of WTO. I think this is not about the rule of origins. It has to be bilateral agreement between our ministry and the Ministry of Commerce of Thailand. Now we are working on that. In the past, there was a case of sugar. You know, we have negotiated and it's done. For coffee, it may not be easy because they have the Coffee Association, Thailand Coffee Association, and they have some companies coffee. You know, they send out in the rate of 5%. For example, Bolaman Company, Dow Coffee, they sent to Thailand, and Thai said you have to have a company established in Thailand. You have to have a factory established in Thailand to receive prioritized tariff 5%. I think once again, I confirm that it's more than just a tariff issue or rule of origins. It's maybe something just beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, this exemplifies the fact that these agreements are an intersection of, yes, customs, trade facilitation, but also trade policy, because we mentioned a few products that are very important for the Lao economy, from garment, rice, and cassava and coffee. So it's important to realize that when you talk about, in that case, custom procedures, it's not only what custom procedures or what the custom department decide, but this is done in conjunction with the trade policy of Lao PDR and some of the certificates that were mentioned by the gentleman from the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. So it's very important to say, not to think like one chapter is one department, but it involves a lot of different departments across the board. I see that you have a few questions, especially from the private sector, and we're very happy to have this question from the private sector. You'll have a chance to ask more questions during the session 2, where we will have 3 representatives from the private sector joining us. But I'd like to stop this session here, this first session here, so that we can enjoy a coffee break, enjoy a coffee, get fresh, get our mind clear for what comes after, and continue asking that type of question, which is really the essence of this dialogue. It's a public-private dialogue, and we're very happy to see that both public and private sector are actively participating. So thank you for that. By now, you should know that I have a Swiss watch and it's still working, but my battery is low, so we have to finish quickly. It's 2:10, so let's start again at 2:25, 15 minutes coffee break, and we will arrange the setting for session 2. Thank you very much.
การเป็นสมาชิกสมาคมกาแฟ
ช่วงหนึ่งเขาเป็นสิทธิ์กับประมาณ2-3 ปีก่อนเข้าใจอยู่อัตราภาษีของยูเอ็นสูง
น้ำใช้ฟองดีแล้ว
แต่ว่าส่งบ่ได้
น้ำใช้ฟองดีแล้วต้องมันอีก
ภายในแต่เจ้าหน้าเขาบอกว่าต้องใช้ตัวฟอร์มระบุเพราะว่ามันสูงระดับเขาต้องใช้ตัวบันทึกเพราะว่าต่าง
ใช่ทั้งสองอันต้องขอเอาทั้งสองอันจึงค่อยได้90คือก็พูดว่ามันกำแพงภาษีเขามันสูงอยู่แล้วเนาะเขาคิดกันบ่อยากให้เอาเข้านะแต่ว่าก็เลยว่า
เพราะกำแพงภาษีบริสุทธิ์ไม่เข้าใจตัว W อันนี้ครับ90%เพราะว่ามันเป็นวงกว้างมันแคบเข้ามาเสมออัตราภาษีต้องลงสำนัก
ฟอร์มดีส่งไปก็90
แต่มันแสดงมาฟอร์มดีมันบ่ถือครับฮู้มันถือครับฮู้มันจะบ่เป็น90ไม่เข้าใจบ่
ฟอร์มดีเขาคน
แสดงว่าฟอร์มดีมันจะต้องเป็น
2% คือเสียอยู่ประมาณนั่นน่ะ40ฟอร์มดีนะแต่สุดท้ายมามันบ่เอายกตัวอย่างคือมื้ออื่นนี่โอเคน้ำใช้ฟอร์มดี 10% แต่ไปคัดกับพืชเขากลุ่มอุตสาหกรรมเกษตรกระทรวงบ่ได้
สมาคมพืชสวนกาแฟน้ำตาลสาลีสินค้าหรือว่า
ให้บริษัทคู่ค้าไปขอโควต้าจึงค่อยได้อยู่ 35% ขอโควต้าส่งขอโควต้านำ
ตัวโควต้านี่บ่แม่นฟอร์มดีเลยโควต้านี่มันกินโควต้าในโดมิโนที่เขาวางโควต้าออกมาจะได้กรอบของอธิการนี่วางบ่ได้ต้องเขาจะวางโควต้าเขาจะไปวางเงินไขว่าเพื่อต้องทำงานคือต้องมีใบอนุมัติจากสมาคมพืชสวนก็ต้องมีเอิ้นว่าอันนี้บนภาษีแล้วมันเป็นลูกลิ้นที่ว่าแม่นเข้าใจนะ
คิดกันคือจึงว่าเห็นว่าเอาระบบอันนั้นอาชีพมันได้บ่ส่งได้สบาย
อาชีพนี่เอาได้
ก็ส่งไปแบบที่ว่าเฮาบ่ต้องมีเงื่อนไขทางเบื้องนั้นบัดนี้คันเฮาให้ทางผู้ค้าเฮาไปขอมาเนาะมันก็ซ้ำเก่าแหละแต่ว่ามันก็ลดคนจาก90ลงหน่อยนึงเหลือก็อยู่ประมาณ60-70เนี่ยนะมันก็ยังมีอันเหลือนะแต่ถ้าสมมุติว่าเฮาได้ในราคาที่ว่าเขาส่งไปได้โดยสะดวกนะโดยที่ว่าบ่มีกำแพงอหยังกีดกั้นนะแล้วแม่นว่าเฮาสิได้ซื้อสินค้าจากชาวสวนอันนี้สูงขึ้นนะเราก็ได้
นี่ก็ของอาเซียนนี้มันจะเป็นอะไรนะครับเราใช้ของอาเซียนในระดับโลกนะเพราะส่วนหลายเขาอีกอาเซียนอีกใช้หลักการของพาลูกทั้งหมดอาเซียนคือกันแต่ว่าอาเซียนจะเลิกกลัวแต่ว่า
อันนั้นนำบัตรตัวนี้มา
แต่ว่ามันขึ้นกับกฎไกการแก้ไขของประเทศเลย
แม่นแล้วคนอย่างที่เขาอยากกีดกันเขาว่าซั่นไปเข้าไปแล้วก็ต้องติดกันตัวเรียกได้อันนั้นยังโทรลงกับทางละทุกปีอันเข้าไปนั่งอยู่ในเก้าอี้ตัวนั้นอันแก้ไขซอยเด้อ
น้องอันอยู่นี่ล่าสุดน้องที่อยู่ในที่แก้ไขรถประชุมกับสะดวกในอาเซียนนั่นแหละน้องยกขึ้นแล้วเขาพูดกับคนไว้เขียนเป็นเปเปอร์อยู่จังดีว่าเขามีนโยบายการนี้เขาครับเสนอของที่ประสานงานธนาคารกำลังประสานงานเรื่องไหนกับเมืองพื้นเขาลากไปเจ๊เลยเป็นอย่างกับซาลีตัวนี้เนาะน้องเสนอเอาข้อกลไกแก้ไขรถไงเป็นประเทศที่มีถึงว่าของอาเซียนมีเสนอกัมพูชาก็คือการเป็นโลกาที่ศึกษาในกรพม่าแต่ลาวนี่เป็นประเทศแรกที่มันยกเขาก่อน
อื่นเดียวกัน เนาะผลิตภัณฑ์มันออกในทางปฏิบัติทุกคนเขาอยากคือประเทศเขาอยากได้จากเราสุดท้ายเขาก็พยายามว่าโอเคเปิดแต่นี่นำใช้ความดีได้แค่40%แต่ไปขัดกับกรมวิชาการเกษตรพวกพืชสวนเขานี่เขาก็จากแนวสิว่าสิเฮ็ดใหม่ก็ได้เสนอไปเขาก็บอกว่าให้รัฐบาลขอมาวันนี้กรมผู้ฟังเขาขอไปเขาก็ลากไปเรื่อยๆเ
ดี๋ยวนี้พวกน้องคิดวิธีใหม่เดี๋ยวนี้พวกน้องที่มีมาตรการของเขาก็หมายว่าเขาน้องขอห้องเขาคือเขาเป็นคนที่เนี่ยแต่ว่าไปเขาก็รู้สึกไงบ้างไม่เกี่ยงไม่ขายหน้ากับเจ้าญาติเช่นขายหน้าตลอดว่าเป็นดังกับเบ้าไปทุกอย่างกินกาแฟจนบ่เบิ่งหน้ากับไทยกันนี่ไงกินข้าวสวยกะหรี่กันกันนี้แต่ว่าสุดท้ายเขาบ่แก้เอาเพราะหมายว่าน้องกับบุ๊กเต็มที่วันนี้น้องบอกกลับขึ้นมาว่ากระทรวงเขาต้องมีมาตรการเลยถ้าเราบ่มีมาตรการเขามาเข้าไปขอห้องเขานี่เขาไม่กันทำเลยวันนี้เขามีมาตรการมากนะเจ้าของรู้สึกแน่บัดนี้จะเจอความยุ่งยากไหมแบบนี้
เพราะว่าก็สู้ในน้ำท่าธุรกิจกัน
ใช่ป่ะจะปีสารวัตรนั่งเรางามเนาะแล้วปีที่ว่าดีสุดเลย
แล้วคุณภาพสูง
แม่นออร์แกนิกอีก
แล้ว
ส่งไปญี่ปุ่นแน่เลย
ญี่ปุ่นก็
ได้ตัวเจ้า
ญี่ปุ่นก็ส่งอยู่ในประเทศญี่ปุ่นก็ส่งอยู่จะไปกัน
ส่งจะมาเขาไปทั่วเขาไปดี
ประเทศนั้นจะบริจิสเตอร์ไปกับประเทศเอาเรื่องตัวใหม่มาเทรดมาพันอย่างคอนเซ็ปต์เวลาประเทศจะเข้าระบบแม่นประหยัดเงินทำเพื่อเซิร์ฟได้เจ้าแบรนด์เดียวกันแต่ว่าเจ้าผมโปรจิสเตอร์จะก็ไม่ได้กินอย่างลงหากกินข้าวนั่นแหละกินอย่างลงว่ะ
My name is Mr. Reserve. I'm not sure anyone reserved. MOIC.
And he's in London. He's from London.
You went on holiday or for what?
Just for my business.
Oh, you want to chat now? They're organising a discussion. Well, that's in a nice central part of London.
Especially the football stadium.
Oh, you like that?
That's how it was off season.
So you have to go and watch cricket instead.
Oh.
That would be very boring. You wouldn't want to watch cricket.
2 days, and 1 or 2 days long.
Oh, I don't know. Feels like eternity. It wasn't
Glasgow.
What in Celtic Rangers. You got it last week. Very good. Lovely. Like a fairy tale. It's the prettiest city in Britain.
Explaining why I visited Liverpool Stadium. Like a museum.
Right, so let's move to session 2 of this second dialogue on the custom procedures and trade facilitation chapter. If you can please go back to your seat, we're going to start, and I'm going to call our speakers for this session 2, and I'd like them to join me on the podium. Dr. Saibandit Raspon, you earn the right to join our session again. Congratulations. Yeah. Dr. Deborah Elms from the Asian Trade Center. Can you please join us in the front? And we have a third guest speaker for this session too, Mr. Stéphane Gilles. And I think I pronounced that correctly because this is a French name, so I don't have issue with that one. Stéphane is a cartographic engineer with a postgraduate degree in mathematics and a Master of Science in Land Administration and Land Use Planning. He's currently the CEO of Viphasouk Lao Limited, Lao National Single Windows Company, since April 2020. He has handled multilateral projects in many countries, all continents, with 27 years of experience securing and managing the implementation of large-scale programs involving various international donors. And he's also been involved in the management of IT governance system. Stéphane, if you could join us to the front. All right. So I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure the audience has a lot of questions. And we have roughly an hour to go through all these questions. So without further ado, I'd like to start with you, Stéphane. Thanks for joining us on this session too. So you're the CEO of Viphasouk Lao Company Limited, and that is working on the Lao National Single Windows System. And you've heard, Stéphane, a few questions from the private sector, especially from the gentleman who had issues with importing some goods, some perishable goods, for instance. You heard a response from the Custom Department. So with your experience, with your perspective, what more could be done to improve customs clearance by the businesses themselves, so getting ready to import and export, getting the certificate, the information in advance, but also by the government agencies? Over to you, Stéphane.
It works. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Very happy to be with you today. And thank you so much for inviting my company, Viphasouk Lao National Single Window, to be part of this meeting. Very important workshop, I think. So before to answer to the first question, I would like to make just an introduction about Lao National Single Window and Viphasouk Lao. Viphasouk Lao is a limited company, private company. Is an entity which has signed a public-private partnership with the Ministry of Finance to develop and implement an IT application named Lao National Single Window. So our company, Viphasouk Lao, is developing this application for the Ministry of Finance and mainly for the Custom Department, and not only for the Custom Department, for the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Commerce, for the DOT, for all the ministries actually. So, but our counterpart is the ministry, or is the Custom Department. So we are working closely with all the ministries indeed. So we have to provide services to help and promote the cross-border trade and develop a tax collection capacity for the government of Laos. That is very important. While reducing the cost of doing business by dramatically, if I can speak like that, increasing the speed, we have that. There's transparency as well, and the control in managing import, transit, and export. I'm talking export a little bit at the end, because our system is not yet ready for the export activities. we are developing the PPP because actually we should, how can I tell you that? The Lao government expressed to develop the project. It was a few years ago, but the development of this application started effectively in April 2020, means something like 2 years and a half. So we just starting the application in the country. We started this application in Vientiane, in Tadalang, a border. We should implement this application for all the 27 borders in the country. And starting by Tadalang, mainly the dry port, the VLP, we stayed there almost 2 years. And finally, we deploy our application to the other border till only June this year. Means we started in June in Boten border in the north, and we started last month in July in Savannakhet province and Kamwan province. For example, just to tell you that when we implement in Kamwan or Savannakhet, we have to implement, I have to implement my team for all the gates, all the checkpoints. We have 3 checkpoints in Kamwan, Napao, FB3 and the free zone. We have 3 gates as well, 3 checkpoints in Savannakhet, FB2, French Bridge 2, sorry, Dan Savan and the Savan free zone, Savan logistic free zone. We have 3 as well gate here in Tadalang, FB1, Tadalang, and the dry port, the VLP. So it means that next month we should start to Paxe, and after we have to go to Bokeo, to the other to the other border to reach 27 borders. So this application is, I can say, new. We have 10 years contract with the government. And this contract started in, as I told you, in April 2020. So we are here for till 2030. So this is the just introduction before to reply to your question, in order to be sure that everyone knows exactly what we are and where we are going. So we are, as you understand, in order to answer properly to the first question, we are an engineering company. We are not really a trade company, but we have to apply exactly what the ministries request to do. Means, for example, if the Ministry of Industry and Commerce asks us to develop a specific template for the application, we have to follow strictly the development of this template. All the business analysis has to be done within the ministry, the relevant ministries. For example, we have to start again, because we already start, but we have to continue to develop our application with the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. And we have to do a business analysis to complete this one with the staff from the Ministry of Agriculture. And this one should be done in collaboration with the staff. We are working like that for all the ministries. So in the question, what more could be done to improve custom clearance by business themselves and by the government agencies? The first action, which would be the best way to proceed, would be for the Lao Custom Department headquarters. And the ministerial levels as well, to explain to the companies, the economic operators or the shipping agency themselves, and to the government as well, agencies, to open their minds, to accept the changement. This is the main point I want to stress, answering to this question. What does it mean? The companies have to try to understand the meaning and the procedure of the system. when the government have a new system. The companies can ask or comment their ideas when they faced issues to the government. That means we need to be open and we need to accept the comment from the companies as well, and as much as possible to integrate the comment from the companies. The government agencies have to coordinate with the relevant and advertise, and sharing the benefits or facilitate the process of custom clearance. Government agencies should organize events to introduce and explain to the small and medium enterprise to understand easily the system. This is for me the main message I want to share with you. The training has to be one of the main points, not only for the staff agencies, the staff from the ministries, but as well for the companies. So I forgot to express something very important. Within the BIVAC Lao, we are providing the training not only on site, but as well here in Vientiane. We have a big, large room to receive people and to be trained on the system. So this is, for us, the training activities is one of the main answer to fix and to speed up not to speed up, I don't like the word, to be more efficient, if I can speak like that. As much as possible, the companies can understand why we have to use a system, why we have to use an electronic system. It will be better. So the awareness campaign within my company is one of my main activities, and this is one I want to develop with you. The second action will be to reduce the cost of modification as well as the delay, to fix the problem of modifying the mistake information that we can put in the system when the companies has to enter in the system, Lao National Single Window, they made a mistake, and this is something we have to do, and we help them to fix this error. The third action is to improve the full use of National Single Window by the economic operators. Custom officer, headquarters, and senior management should consider implementing the system on a mandatory basis. This is very important, on the mandatory basis. What does it mean? If you are not obliged to use the electronic system, and I remind you that the electronic system has to be the same for all the country. Today is an agreement with the Lao country. Tomorrow it will be with Asean and RCEP, sorry. So it means that our system has to be in link and in conformity with the standards. And we know that we should as well to improve the system regarding the Asean and the RCEP activities. But this one is maybe for answering of one of the questions from Sir from the Ministry of Agriculture or MOIC, that obviously the paper should not be the following action we have to do. Everyone has to know exactly what they have to do on the border, because they have to use a unique system. The unique system, whatever the standard from Lao, first of all today, from ASEAN and RCEP to tomorrow. This is the main. But for that, in order to be efficient, we should use the system. Because today we have two ways. Some use the system, others doesn't want to use the system. So if the government doesn't oblige to use the system, this is a big issue we face today. Not for my company, it's not an issue, but for the government. Because it's one of the points of the GDP for the government as well. That is very important. I want to stress this point with you. And the fourth action, during the business analysis, the government agencies must designate a specific competent person to work with. So we need to have the very competent person to work with each ministries, because the system is not yet completed. We have to complete with the MOIF, but we have as well to complete it with other ministries, Ministry of Telecommunication, Ministry of even Ministry of Defense. We have to develop our application for all the ministries involved for this action, import, export, and transit action. This is my answer for the first question.
Thank you, Stefan. So if I understood correctly what you've just mentioned at the first part of your answer, you are helping different ministry in eventually to have some of the documents that are requested for trade, import and export to be online, so that importer or exporter would fill this document online, will not have to have those documents printed, can do that even before the goods arrive or are sent. And this document would be transmitted or exchanged with an administrations. And this is not only document in the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, you mentioned also Department of Transport, you mentioned Ministry of Agriculture as well. And that it's not only for Laos, but they also have to be compatible with the national single window system of other countries. Is that correct? All right.
Something I want to add, that indeed our contract is to handle all the ministries. All means we are developing our system step by step, and right now we are almost more than 60% of our development. When I said 60%, means that 40% remain in terms of ministries. As I told you, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Telecommunications, so but we are going step by step. And the same for the export activities. But our system is a unique system, means that the economic operators, the company, has to register in the system. And tomorrow, it's just to tell you that tomorrow, maybe I should have the question about Asikuda system, because we have two systems, but just to prevent about this question. Obviously, now we are working with some specific interface to link and to have a bridge between Asikuda and single window. And in a few weeks, the system will be unique, absolutely unique. Means people cannot be disturbed by entering 2 times, but now it's already done. They have not to enter 2 times the data. Everything has to be done once. And moreover, everything has to be done before. Means that the economic operator has to know exactly what he has to handle, and from home or from office, he or she can do it, of course, after training. But this is and without paper. And in order to avoid to go to the specific ministries to get the license or permits, no need. This one has to be done by remote. This is we have 2 advantages. First, the standards, as you mentioned. The standard is something very important, and the system is following the standards. And as I told you previously, we are strictly following the standards as each ministries impose us. We have not to think, oh, this good or not good. No. We have to. Sometimes we can provide for the workflow what should be the best business engineering, if we can do. But in terms of the standard, we are using what the ministries give us. So means that the standard has to be the same for everyone. That is the first advantage of the system, the electronic system, and the second advantage is paperless. That is important.
Thank you, Stefan, for precisions. I'm turning to you, Sai Pandit, maybe taking on some of the points that Stefan mentioned and the gentleman earlier in the room about the mechanism for private sector, and here I'm talking to you as NCCR representative and RG representative. What are the mechanisms for businesses to talk priorities in terms of customs, facilitation, compliance with the government? Like Stefan said in his introduction, businesses, you have to be aware, you have to be informed, you have to be trained about the procedures. And then we heard also from the customs department that, well, there are procedures in place, you just need to follow them, right? But there are so many different documents, so many different trade agreements, so many challenges, I guess, so what is the mechanism you have for maybe for small businesses to talk to the government? They cannot all talk to the government, so they go through NCCI and other agencies, but how can you prioritize their issues, and how do you bring these issues to some department, MOIC, etc.?
Thanks for the very hard question, Sven. Yeah, of course, for again, thank you for organizing this workshop and dialogue between the international communities, the local business, and as well as the government. It is, I think, a really good platform that the business have some voice to express, and that the government can hear what we are facing, what kind of issues, and so on. So regards to your question, I think what Stefan is doing is that, yes, we make use of the system. Our exporter and importer have to make use of the system that the government has implemented. There has been a lot of, how can I say, capacity building, has been a lot of awareness campaign in formulating the business to reach out and to study and to make use of the system. Of course, still not everybody yet can make use of it due to some reason from the company itself. But nevertheless, someday they will have to cope with this one and make use of it for sure. Regards to the issues and so on that you are mentioning, what we are facing as exporter, yes, there's so many forms. As you can see, this is for Stefan mainly is the custom clearance, import and export. But there's a other form like you just mentioned for trade preference. So of course there is also have to be another department to do it and so on. But not every company is understanding this as well and make use of the trade preference and so on. Yes. As the representative from the business sector, we are trying to set up a forum. So one of the forum that we are doing at the moment, which is in place and very well accepted by the government, which called LBF or Lao Business Forum, which is organized. Normally it should be twice a year, but due to many circumstances, we can only organize once a year. But at least in this LBF, we can express matters concerning cross-sectoral issues, something like export. So because export means agriculture products, garments, electronics, and so on, and also importing a lot of things as well. So we try to do as a representative from the business, from many association business as well. At this time, what is the big issue is regarding to the decree 0718. It's regards to the this is transportation, because it how can I say, it raised more cost than it should be. So it add up to the production, everything, because the shipment has to load if arrive at the dry port, for the case in Vientiane, and some others destination at the custom, and then taking and then unload and loading to the local transportation to transport to the final destination inside the country. So, and same for the export part. So this is actually the main issue that we are discussing with the government on how to suppose to diminish this cost, and it's still in discussion. So I hope that by end of this year, we will be able to find some good solution in order to not to have more costs in this part. Yes.
Thank you, Saibon. It's just a follow-up question related to what Stefan presented. Is there awareness among Lao businesses that this process of digitalizing all these forms and then using computer to fill all these forms in the future is the way forward, is going to happen? And if yes, who is providing the support for this company to move from offline to online, and then to be knowledgeable in how to fill the form, and as Stefan was saying, without mistakes?
Yes, I mentioned about the government has conducted a lot of training already. So they have invited people from many business associations, including SMEs, exporters, small, whoever, so that they can be aware and know how to use the system. So it was a pilot sometimes. I don't know how long it's been for pilot before it been really implemented as a standard. I think it's still in pilot or already rolling out? Still? Already. So now rolling out already, right? So everybody can have access now. Of course, during the pilot, the company who participated has allocated special resources for that. So they, of course, they have to upgrade themselves. They have to buy the PC. They have to connect to the internet. They have to study the system, how to data entry on this part. Yes, the business, if they want to success, they have to put in this investment as well. And we have and highlighted that if you are not moving up to that stage, you cannot export. It's not the government's fault. The government provide you the tools already. So make use of the tools that has been provided. So and we are supporting all the businesses who is still in need of training and so on. So I think the government also has such facilities as well, and also is in social media and so on, right, on this part. So this is all accessible for business who want to see and study and learn more about this. What I can say now is that most of the export businesses already in the system. So only the newcomer maybe need to study more about this, but all the things is in place. Just make use of it. Invest in your human resource, invest in your computer, or moving to the Industry 4. We are talking about Industry 4 already. So if you are not moving, you cannot make international trade. Thank you.
Thank you, Sai Bandit. And I'm going to turn to Deborah for a more like regional perspective. And a lot of the discussion we have, and I have seen happening in other countries when you talk about RCEP or customs, it comes to national single window. In your experience, in what's happening in other countries, is this process of having a national single window the panacea for businesses to start using forms online, to start to digitalize this themselves, or are we still very far away from having a functioning national, let alone ASEAN single window? So what's your experience in other countries?
So I was thinking as you were talking, I think ASEAN was supposed to have single windows in place by 2010 and the national levels, and by the all of ASEAN by 2015, and it's 2022 and we still don't have it. So we're way behind where we thought we were. And I think the good news about coming late is that you have an opportunity to learn from others. So yay. One of the things that we should have learned, but we don't seem to be learning fast enough, is what you don't want to do is take an offline process and make an electronic version. So take the piece of paper and put it online. That is not a single window. That is just taking a document and putting it in the digital format, but the same damn document. No, what you really want is, I only put the information in once, and then you sort out at the back end what you do with that information. So then you could populate 1,000 different forms based on your one piece of information. Because what you don't want to do, for example, you don't want to have to put your company information in 15 times in a transaction. You'd like to put it in once, and then it automatically puts it in whatever form you need for the moment in which you need it. That is possible, but it is more challenging than folks imagine. And what we have, I think part of the reason that this has taken so long is that everyone starts by, let's take the piece of paper and then replicate it, without spending the time to say, what is it we really, what's the information what do we want the information for? What are we intending to do with that information? Who needs it? And who doesn't need it? Is there information we're collecting that we don't need? And the answer must be yes, there's information we don't need. And there's information that we could use. And then speed the whole procedure up so that we are not having to have approvals. I mean, one of the big advantages to me of much of this is that we are meant to collect the right information at the right time and then perform appropriate risk assessment based on that. So we are not taking, please, 45 days to approve someone's documentation. You already know who is at risk and who is not at risk. And if you are a low risk company with low risk transactions, you are automatically approved, and we move on and we focus our attention and resources on high risk activities. And we have in place the procedures to be able to identify who is in which category, high risk, low risk. And part of this national single window is you can't do that risk assessment if you don't have the data. So let's get the data, let's assess the data, and then let's take people who are not in a high risk category out of the pool and give them basically an automatic clearance with the potential for an occasional check, because occasionally we want to make sure that they're fine, but let's not spend time on every single documentation, on every single shipment, on every single box, on every single border entry point. I mean, this is insanity. In 2022, we've watched other people do this. Let's not replicate this. Let's move along and actually clear stuff that needs to be cleared as quickly as possible. Otherwise, your costs are never going to be you're never going to be competitive. You're just not, because your neighbors are all getting their act together, and many of them are actually doing this well. So you can't afford to be backwards. You got to actually minimize costs, minimize clearance, and then crucially for me, focus the money and the resources on risk, because there are still some high risk transactions that are taking place. And that's what we want to focus on, not on the average garden variety, cassava that's going across the border. That seems insane to me.
What does the RCEP agreement itself say about national single window? Is there, because you were saying that we're so delayed with the ASEAN single window, so is there a requirement for country to accelerate
I don't think so, because of the experience of ASEAN. So I think it probably has a sort of shall endeavor to and cooperate on. But what it does say, again, is move online as quickly as possible, move as many procedures online as possible, make sure that you're following risk acceptance procedures in clearing cargo so that you're not, again, inspecting everything. But one of the challenges is, and you can well imagine, given who's in RCEP, at the time 16 very diverse countries, from rich to poor, big to small, landlocked seaports, lots of free trade zones, no free trade zones. I mean, there's everything under the sun. Trying to get a consistent approach in RCEP is challenging because of that diversity. So there is the beginnings of some consistent procedures, including in customs and trade facilitation, but some of it is in a language that is less helpful, because it's, shall endeavor, shall try your hardest, shall do everything you can, and not you shall do X, get it done, don't argue, get it done. That's less common in RCEP because of the diversity. But again, I'm hoping that over time, and as we get comfortable and consistent procedures in place, that you switch from shall endeavor to shall. You shall do this, and then we actually get some stuff done.
Thank you, Debbie.
But I would say, I mean, if it isn't disheartening to you to discover that we are not yet implementing RCEP because we haven't transposed the 2012 HS codes to the 2017, I mean, you should all be demoralized by that. Frankly, that is depressing, especially because we're actually at the 2022 codes right now. So you're two updates behind, and you still don't have an agreement in place in month 8 after entry into force. So let me just repeat that. We are 2 updates behind on HS codes. And they're only trying to do one of those updates now and can't get it done 8 months after we entered into force. So that is just depressing, frankly. I hope I don't want to depress all of you, but I am depressed by that story. So we need to get some more enthusiasm by some of the members to implement what they agreed to do much faster, or the consequences for companies, especially in a time of problems and crisis and inflation and difficulties, continues to be a real issue. So, let's stop talking about doing stuff from two systems ago and actually make it happen.
I think this requires clarification, Debbie. Now, what you mentioned is that we are 2 update behind. What is meant by that? So we are moving from 2012.
This is a bit down in the weeds, but every product that you see, right? Everything that you see around you has a tariff code or an HS code attached to it. Every 5 years, the customs authorities update that. So we are still in RCEP using the 2012 codes because at the time that RCEP was getting started, that's the codes we had. Then it took 8 years to negotiate. In the meantime, because it gets updated every 5 years, you're supposed to update the codes. So they're trying to update now to the 2017 batch. But actually, the 2022 batch started in January. So we're, again, 2 editions of this behind. And so as soon as they get this batch done, you can imagine someone will say, well, now you're 5 years behind already, making you ask the question, I assume, why in the heck didn't you start with the 2022 codes? Why would you try to implement to last version of this basically software? Like, why don't you just update to the most relevant one? Why would you update? Think about it in your own life. Why would you update your computer to a system software that is 2 editions ago? Wow. Super frustrating. And again, challenge attached to 15 very diverse governments, lots of different agencies and ministries, capacity challenges, and the net result is not what we would like to see, but it is a problem. So as you encounter these issues, you need to complain loudly and vigorously, or it won't get changed.
Steph?
Let me just be clear.
Go ahead.
I'm not suggesting that Lao is the problem on this one. Let me just be clear. There are other governments that are more of an issue. This is not a specific issue for Lao, but
And Stefan, I think the work you're trying to do is very important for accelerating the process of sending goods across borders. When were you first exposed to RCEP? Is it today? Or when you work with government, Ministry of Finance, etc., is it part of the discussion already that a new HS code is going to come, new procedure are going to come, so you have to be aware? Or is it something that is not part of the discussion you're having?
Talking about the government, the way we are working with the government in terms of the specification of the HS code. So, for example, this is, we have some issues with the HS code here, but not so much, actually. Not so many, sorry. Actually, here, for example, let's say one example with the Ministry of Health we are working on today to integrate the food division in the system. So at the beginning, we faced a problem with to integrate the HS code, and the HS code was not yet clear with us. So my team worked closely with the Ministry of Health in order to define the HS code, and we compare this one. We talk with the custom officer in charge of this action, and we identify the good HS code. So we are working closely with the relevant ministries, mainly the custom department, and the Ministry of Health in order to fit it properly, the HS code. So actually in Laos, I don't see any problem about this issue.
I should have also made clear, before you all get totally depressed, the HS codes don't change very much, most of them. So most things we're not changing, carpet, chairs, clothing. We're not making new carpet and clothing. The HS codes that do change, you might imagine, especially are in the tech sector, where we are constantly iterating. And so if you have a mobile phone with a camera on it, for example, like that was a new thing, and what is it? Is it a phone? Is it a camera? Is it a what? So in the tech sector, especially as we make new products, you need a new code. And we have had, again, we're going to get slightly into the weeds, and I apologize. We have had consistent codes for all members in the World Customs Organization to the 6-digit level. So at 6 digits, we are all consistent, and the WCO is the one that runs this every 5-year exercise. Let's update them. The challenge is that at the domestic level, we have more numbers to more finely detail whether or not we're talking about, you know, wall-to-wall carpet or an area carpet or a runner or a carpet of wool or whatever. There's lots of categories that I might make domestically. And so those are in your control and not in everyone else's. Asean is supposed to have a consistent code, but they're not very consistent themselves about whether or not they apply it. And so sometimes Asean codes are different. And this is how many of you get stuck in the category of other, because ASEAN is consistent, and then they have a category called other, and everything just gets thrown into there, and then usually there is a tariff applied. So we have these issues around what is the number we're going to apply to a product. Most of it doesn't change, but in the tech sector especially, you can imagine as we invent stuff, you try to figure out what is this thing that we're talking about, and where do I put it on the numbers and the forms and all of that. So it's not, we have to completely redo all of our codes, but some of them will change as we invent new products.
Right. I'd like to now invite questions from the audience instead of me asking questions, because I have a lot of questions for them, but I think you've been pretty consistent in asking a relevant question, interesting questions. So I'd like to give the floor to that side maybe. I know that side I always have questions, but any questions? So either on the Lao national single window system to Stefan, or the how to work between private sector and government to Dr. Saibandit, or on the regional experience and the RCEP chapter on custom procedures to Deborah. Any question? All right. Any question on that side? Oh, yes, I have a question over there.
So sorry. Quick question, because we discussed today earlier about that till now we should select the best way to import or export, because sometimes we can use RCEP, but sometimes ASEAN or any other bilateral agreements. So question to Stefan, to you, if the current single window system is ready, that we can choose the best option for our import or export, or is just a fixed tariff and we cannot choose anything else what is defined in the system?
By the way, the export is not yet implemented, but is on the process to be before the end of this year, but it's not possible to choose. We have a specific process and we have to follow the process. We have not the option. If it is your question, if we can have option, no. From my perspective, what I know, no, impossible.
So there will be question to Ministry of Finance, the Custom Department, how we can use the new agreement if we have no choice through the system.
Do you want to respond from Custom Department to the question, or have you heard the questions? Yeah. Do you want?
Can I
respond?
add something? Just, but obviously, Lucas, if the ministries, the government told us to open for the option, we should do that. This is once again, our system is the mirror on what the government wants, and we have to develop what they want. Just that to be sure.
Yeah, you want to
While
respond?
they think about that one, let me just say, sadly, we have this problem in other governments as well. So even in Singapore, it's very difficult to pick when you're doing the single window, which is now in like version 27 or something. How do you pick which FTA you want to use? And I've been asking for years why it is that customs cannot create a drop-down box that says, you want to export a microphone from here to there. Did you know there are 15 different agreements you could use, and here they are, and here are the rules on them. Which one would you like? And I am told it's not possible, and I have no idea why. So it's not just a thing here, it's a challenge. And I think it's just the complexity and the difficulty, and I don't know what, maybe it's a lack of imagination, but it is not an unusual problem.
So thank you, Stefan, and thank you, Debbie. Yes, please.
ข้าพเจ้าชื่อสมพรขอมีคำเห็นเพิ่ม
My
เติม
name is Sampon. I'd like to have additional comments on HS code of the Lao PDR. This microphone must be off the podium there. Let me repeat. I'd like to have additional comments on the use of HS code of Lao PDR. Lao PDR at the current time, at the present time, we still count on HSCN of Asean as a main. I can say that. We have the national tariff line 10 digits, but it's not complete. The use of HS code, we still use HCM 2017 because we use the article agreement. We have the process of transition, and we have a plan to complete it at the end of this year. And that by then we would be able to use HCN code 2022 in January 2023. We be like 1 year delay. So once we upgrade ACM code in ASEAN, that means Lao PDR would upgrade into ASEAN automatically. Thank you. That's additional information.
Thank you, sir, for the clarification. Was there? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to have one question for Stefan with regard to the ASEAN single window. As you already explained that the use of the Lao national single window is in place. However, if I'm not mistaken, it's only for import. But for export, we're still, in the process of development. As my rules of origin division, we have been implementing the electronic certificate of origin, and the system is in place, developed by the World Bank. And we launched that system since 2015. And until now, the system have been used and supported by the NIDA to link the Lao ECO to the ASEAN Gateway in order to implement the ASEAN single window. So that's why the Lao exporters who use the CO form D in general, in specific, to export their products, and the importing country can acknowledge, automatically. But my question is that if we think, in the long term, there should be, initiative to integrate the COs, the ECO and the Lao National Single Window together to put in place. I also think about other certificate of origin, for example, the phytosanitary or sanitary certificate, which should be in place too. So I would like to hear your views. What is your way forward in order to develop or integrate the system so it will consider as the full national single window for Laos in terms of import and export? Thank you.
Obviously, you're right. Definitely, we should integrate. We should take into account all the system. As you said, we are not in place for the export activities because this one we need a green light from the government to do that. First of all, and we don't get it right now, but we should start soon. However, as I told you previously, my team, my IT team is going to see all the ministries, the relevant one, to work on the business analysis. And in our system is not perfect. We are working every day to update the system and to be more close to the companies and to the ministries, obviously. But what we have to do is to consider all the existent module or application, as you said, to integrate in the system. Definitely, yes. This is the business analysis we are doing for developing the export module. For example, we are working with the Ministry of Health right now, and we integrate the new action. We have to integrate as well the risk analysis in our system. We have to help the inspectors to do the work properly when they have to inspect the container. So our system is working we are developing the specific risk analysis, as Deborah talked previously as well. So it means that the system is still in construction. At least now we have to almost implement all the import and transit. But of course, for the export, we are still working. We have just starting, but we have as well to improve for the import and transit, mainly for the import. We have to improve our system regarding what it exists today. As you said, you talk about the World Bank project. That of course we have to integrate this one, and we have to be to be in phase with this one. But this is what we have. Our plan is to send the team to visit each ministries and to implement it properly. And as I told you, we will start by the timber from the MOIC and the Ministry of Agriculture, and we will develop the other item as well. Good. But obviously, our system has to be the mirror of what it exists in Laos. I cannot answer other because if the custom department told me, Stefan, you have to develop this one with your team, we will do it. We are services. We are under the ministries. We are working for you. We are not working for other activities. I'm clear on that. So it means that our next activities is to develop the export activity module and to develop this one as soon as possible, integrating all the existing products.
Thank you, Stefan.
Deborah, you want to add
I was
something?
just going to make, it sounds like a very simple thing. You just say, just put this online, done. It's actually quite challenging, and crucially, it's a problem. It's actually, in some way, this is one of those rare areas where I think it's easier to agree in a way with your international colleagues than with your domestic colleagues. Because what's happened in Asean, nobody else has this national single window connected to a larger single window, because most places realize that it's the domestic agencies that are the problem. And so you have to trust that your domestic agencies will cooperate, and that many of them will potentially lose their relevance if there are forms that are eliminated. Crucially, if it goes online, there is less opportunity for side payments for processing. Many governments have real challenges attached to the consolidation of some of their procedures, especially in an online, more transparent process. And that has created real obstacles to the consolidation of national single windows. And then, as if that wasn't stressful enough, then you have to share that information with your colleagues in another country, and they have to trust that your systems actually match with their systems. And that trust, despite a lot of efforts and integration in ASEAN over the decades, is not as high as you would like it to be. And so the ability to seamlessly integrate the kind of information you would like to seamlessly integrate is actually quite hard. It's hard domestically, it's hard internationally, and the net result is what seems like a pretty straightforward, shouldn't we just do this once and share the information and be done with it, is harder than people imagine, because you're ultimately worried as a government about, especially, what happens if we get unsafe products? What happens if we have citizens who die because they took something that was fraudulent? What happens with the money trail? Are we getting the right amount of taxes based on it, et cetera? It becomes way more complicated than it sounds like it should be. And it takes way longer always than anyone thinks it ought to.
Thank you, Debbie. Before I give the floor to the lady in the back, just remind the online participants that if they want to ask questions, they just use the Q&A box in the Zoom application, and then we will relay the question to our speakers here. Yes, the lady in the back, you have a question. Go ahead.
เจ้าก่อนอื่นกะขอนับถือทางคณะประธานเนาะ
Respected Chair, my name's Jantai Thamawongsa. So I attend the seminar today because I'm a vice president of the Lao Furniture Association. I have my own business too. I have a company. I have a group of business that composed of. We have furniture factory. We have recycle factory. We have markets. We have transportation services as well. What I'd like to ask Mr. Stefan on preparing the documents for Asikuda, I think, is it necessary to select qualified person? People with bachelor degree should know about that, or what? So far, my company, I proposed to learn this 3-4 years already. We still have not been listed for the learning. I don't know why. So far, we have to pay a company at the Friendship Bridge, to issue us that. So that creates additional cost to my company, and it's quite difficult to line up, and in time to export. I mean, if you one day delay, you pay much more cost. For example, like you got to pay 1,000 baht per day if your product cannot be exported before 2 p.m. I mean, but beyond that, Thai will not receive it. There's a problem, difficult problem like that at the border. I want it to be facilitated. Even my staff, would graduate from secondary school, but they have capacity. They have computer skill. I want them to learn as well. I don't want you to mention that qualification is that it has to be bachelor degree or, someone with that bachelor background. They have secondary graduate, they graduate from secondary level, but they have the computer course background. They can learn, I think. I'd like to ask you, please increase your schedule of training for my company. Do not limit qualification of the staff. In my views, I have lined up for 4 years. I still have not been able to pick, for learning my staff. I request, please, consider this. Thank you.
So, Stefan, I think the question is directed to you, but I guess it's not only specific to Asikuda. All the certificate that you mentioned, the permit that you mentioned, one day or another, staff of the company will have to learn how to process and fill this information.
I think Madame present a very good, not question is a question, but his observation is very important, because if you make some mistake, you have some delay, and it's costly for the company. This is not what we're looking for. That's for sure. But let me answer to you properly. First of all, you have to consider that Asikuda is not in our side. Asikuda is under the custom side. So we have to work with Asikuda, and now I cannot talk too much about that because it is on the process, but we should have only one system integrating Asikuda. That is the first point. The second point is, as I told you, we will provide a training as much as you want. 2-3 times, 1 month, we can go in your company. I can send my team to train your team. Today for the import and transit, tomorrow for the export. What you are talking today is for the export and Asikuda. This is not yet under our consideration. I'm talking about national single window system. But tomorrow it will be. That's why I presume that I have to consider what you said right now, because I'm pretty sure that in few weeks we should be faced with this problem when we have to consider the export activities. I'm sure for that. So what I want to express to you, first of all, you're definitely right, and I understand. We have, the system has to help you. The system has not to interrupt you, to be a constraint. No way. That is not possible. So my team has to, first of all, train your team the time we need. You can come in our office, we can go in your different office. I send people in the border, my people, for full time. 2-3 people full time in the border, not to work with custom officer, but to help the companies to use the system. And it is not in our contract. Believe me, when we signed the contract, it was to develop a system, but not to send the people in the border. Believe me, it cost a lot for us. But I decided quickly in April 2020, when I came to send the people for full time, because I can see that this is the way we have to work in order to help the company and the custom officer. That's for sure, and it will be for long. Means we should have training on site, and we should have training in the headquarters in Vientiane, here, green building, where we are. That is the first point. The second point I want to explain you, that is, the system is still complex, even as Asikuda, and the system has a lot of constraints, which needs to fix, and this is why we are here, to fix this point in order to avoid to have some delay. But sometimes, and I'm talking under the responsibility of my team here, my colleagues, that I cannot be behind the people to make the mistake. The mistake is not to use the system. The mistake is to enter the bad data. And that is not our responsibility. It's not, and just to tell you, our system no need to be a PhD or even bachelor. No need. Sincerely, is as you said, all your team can use the computer. It's like that. It's no need to have a high level knowledge in terms of university background. Not at all. Just to know how to use a computer and to be a little bit more how do you say attentive, to consider the training, to be serious on during the training, to understand the process. And if you follow the process, it's okay. But if the team from the company made a mistake, for example, they put 1 ton and it is 1.5 or 2 tons, this is not our responsibility. And sometimes we should correct on behalf of the EU this mistake, because they call us, oh, I made a mistake. And we do. My team is doing to help you. So for that, I cannot do something proper for you because this is the responsibility of your team. So you have to tell to your team as well, take care. When you have to enter the data, you have to take care. But for the system as well, this is our responsibility to take care and to help you that the system has to be more easily as possible. And we are still working, as I said at the beginning, the system, I can consider the system is still a little bit heavy, and we are working to simplify the system as much as possible. Every day, believe me. So, and that's why I want to work with you. I want to, maybe you can get contact with my team, Miss Nock here, Miss Itason, and we can go in your office and you can work together. But if it is for Asikuda, for the export activities, this one has to be done right now with the Ministry of Finance, the Custom Department. This is my answer.
All right. Thank you, Stefan. I hope it was good answer. I hope you can liaise with Stefan or with his team here to see how your staff can be trained on the documents that Stefan mentioned, but not Asikuda for export, obviously. Any other questions from the audience? Any comment, clarification? No? On that side, online, no question? No. All right. Well, does that mean that you have understood everything, that you are ready to go to the exam that we have now? Yes? No? No, you don't. Why are you hiding yourself? So I hope it was useful, and thank you, Saibandit, Deborah, and Stefan for the candid answers, for the very clear answers as well. I hope we've all learned something today. One thing we've learned is that it's not simple, it's complex, and we here are not behind schedule, but I think in terms of HS code, we've heard Deborah mentioning how behind schedule we are. So, well, I hope the government official in the room here have heard the plea from the private sector and could relay this in the next discussion negotiation at the RCEP level. With this, I'd like maybe to give a round of applause to our speakers. Thank you. And the session would not be complete without a word of wisdom from Jeremy. So I'm going to give the floor to Jeremy to maybe reflect on what we've learned today and also give you some incentive to come back tomorrow for the other 3 PPD. Because you've been good with 2 PPD today, tomorrow we'll have 3 PPD. Thank you very much. Jeremy, the floor is yours. Sure, you may go back to your chair. Let us give the floor to Jeremy.
Once again, many thanks to our panelists this afternoon. for the very rich discussion we've had. Obviously, not just from their initial responses, but also from the questions we've had from all of you participating, the responses, interventions, replies from government. As we know, this is so important to have these types of dialogues, to start generating discussions like this, to be able to move forward, to hear and understand the issues that are being faced by the private sector, and to work with the government to try to address them. So really appreciate everyone's participation today. I think everyone who's been here today realizes there have been a lot of issues. If we reflect back on the two dialogues today, I think to summarize and encapsulate them would be rather difficult for me. We certainly know from what we've heard that these issues are very complex. They require, there is no quick fix, but certainly persistence is needed, continual dialogue is needed, interaction, an openness, a willingness to invest in the solutions, not technical solutions, but sort of capacity building solutions as well. And this will be the way to move forward. And the issues Laos faces is similar to many of your neighboring countries as well. And we all want the benefits of RCEP to be realized. And I think by having events like this to start the process is a good way to move forward. So as I say, here we are here today. It's important to make sure that these discussions reach beyond these walls. We do have people watching and zooming in online, so I'm very pleased that I think it's, last time I looked, it was 51 people watching in. Not a big number, but again, it shows that there is a level of awareness, and whether it's awareness or concern, people want to get involved and understand these issues. So whilst we're here today, it will also be possible to rewatch and revisit these dialogues we've had. As we've been on Zoom, it has also been recorded. So later we can share the link with all of you here and online. And of course, we really hope you can share it with friends, colleagues, business networks, because the more understanding there is of these issues, we can generate discussion there. So yeah, the more we can share these discussions, the more conversation we can generate. And hopefully that will provide, we can start creating positive feedback channels between business and government. So other than thanking all the speakers and panelists, and of course our fantastic moderator, the very shy, retiring Sven, and of course I'd also like to thank our fantastic translator. I don't know how he manages to keep up with all these conversations. A very well-deserved round of applause. So we will resume tomorrow morning, 8:45, I believe, for those who are attending day 2. So we will look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. So once again, thank you everyone, and I look forward to seeing, hopefully most of you tomorrow. So have a good rest and have lots of reflections about today. Thank you.